One of the things that that originally made me want to be a writer was my upbringing, which was, when I grew up in a pretty privileged household. My parents kind of lived the immigrant dream. They were the success story. They came to America with nothing from China and became these huge successes. My dad was an engineer, made good money in Silicon Valley. We had very comfortable lives, but there was sort of a underbelly of unhappiness in our family and dysfunction. And I think what fascinated me about our lives and my upbringing in particular was this sort of disconnect between the narratives that are external and are popular and what we think of as our lives, and the actual reality of what it's like to live and breathe our lives on a daily basis and through the years. And my novels usually have something to do with sort of a family's underbelly, some sort of dysfunction, in a funny way. My novels are comedic, so I think my art form is the reason that I've been inspired in that art form is to address sort of that tension between our realities and what sort of the dominant narratives are out in the world.
When you're writing, when you're on the page every day, and things are going very well, and this is sort of a different, this takes on a different quality for writers because it's not a performance.
Yeah.
Right? And as an artist, like a painter, that is physically embodied to a certain extent. So writer is very special in this way, in this question. It's different from the other ones that I'm interviewing. So, but when things are going very well, when you are, whoa,
right,
just like everybody stand back, this character's taking over, whatever. And I'm sure it's happened to you. Can you describe it, and can you describe what it feels like in the body center when that happens? Are you aware of, sometimes the critical mind steps away and you're not thinking along the lines you usually do? I'm putting words in your mouth and I'll stop. So what does it feel like in the body center when things are going so well on the page?
I kind of liken it to a runner's high, where you get to that point where you consciously can think, oh, I can do this forever. I could run 50 miles, that point in the run where you're maybe 7-8 miles in, where your body's warm and you're in a good rhythm, and it doesn't last a long time, right? Like by mile 10 or 11, you're like, when does this end? And I kind of get to that runner's high moment in my writing almost every day, usually about 45 minutes in, after the coffee is kicked in and you're in a good groove, and you're like, I could do this all day, and then you never do. And then 20 minutes later, you're like, I got to go to the restroom, I got to get on with my day. You start thinking about, all the things you have to do for the rest of the day. But, right at about that 45-minute to an hour point, you're like, I can do this pretty much. This is what I'm on this earth meant to do today for those 10, 15 minutes. I feel that way.
Does it pull you to it every day? Then do you remember it and you want to go to it?
Yes, absolutely. I go to bed and I can't wait to wake up in the morning to do it. And that's just been the biggest gift of a feeling. And I've worked in the corporate world, and you definitely do not feel that way. When you go to bed in the morning, you're like, oh, I got all these things to do in the morning. But as a writer, and I've been doing it for pretty much as my sole occupation for the last 3 or 4 years, it's been an amazing experience. It's just a world of difference, and it's hard to explain to other people what that feels like, because we all have complicated lives and we all have to make a living and all that stuff, but to be able to do it is just such a gift.
I agree. Yeah, I'm hearing you completely. Okay, so the third question in this is, what does the world need to know about writing and novels, and why is it important? for the world to know about writing. What's the urgency of that?
Yeah, I think when I was a younger writer, I would have said that it's important to connect with your audience, and I still think that's important. But over the years, I've come to realize that it's almost just as important to connect with other artists or other not just other writers, but other creatives, like yourself, to kind of continue to inspire the art form. I think by doing it, you're essentially helping keep it alive, doing your small part to keep it alive. Because in many cases, there's not that much of a commercial reward behind it. If you're just looking for commercial rewards, you probably don't want to, get up and go to the coffee shop and write a novel that might take anywhere from 2 to 10 years. There's not much of a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow, but you do it because you enjoy it every day, like in the way that I was describing, where it's just like you can't wait to get back to the page, get back to your characters, and you're helping keep the art form alive. And it's not just by connecting through the audience who may or may not be, appreciators of the art form like you are, but also of other appreciators and practicers of that art form, that you're hoping that, being able to inspire them and inspire each other is actually like a big part of keeping that art form alive.
Name something that has been an inspiration to you and which has influenced greatly your creative life.
I would say the work of Haruki Murakami, the novelist. I think when I was a young writer, I was looking for Asian role models, male role models, to kind of take my work forward and kind of be a sort of guiding light. And I think his approach to sort of this everyman and global everyman, I guess, in Japan, as most of his novels are about, this one type, this very Haruki Murakami-esque person, right? He's become a brand in a lot of ways, but the guy that likes cats and likes eat the ears of people, all these like idiosyncratic things, like surrealism, and I like to play with form and with reality in my work as well. He was a writer that I just really admired, and was a reason that I took up writing as the form to kind of express the things that I wanted to express.
Can you tell me a time when something surprising happened, when you were in this type of, mental environment where you were unimpeded? A time, can you remember something that was surprising? That never happened before.
Yeah, usually, in the process of a novel, and I've written a few of them, like at some point, you get to a point where you're going off the outline. You're like, you have a plan and an idea of what you're doing, and then you think, wow, this way would be a lot better, and you find it on the page on that day, in that moment. And usually you kind of like lose time a little bit, where all of a sudden you're like, I can't stop doing this. Right now I'm going to explore this little cave, so to speak, in the novel, and that's always like super gratifying to me and unusual. That there is a level of daily exploration that I enjoy as part of the creative experience, and it's one of the reasons I keep going back.
And I'm just curious, this may be relevant or not, but is it usually character-driven or is it plot-driven, or equally?
It can be either, yeah. It can be either. It could be some aspect of the setting. You're like, I'm going to move this over here and it would be perfect, or I have to set something here. That would be much better for the novel as a whole. But you don't really see, like when you're 30,000 feet away, trying to plan the novel on the page. Like you have to actually be inside to know sometimes. But yeah, I think a lot of times it is character-driven as well. And I think, again, it's like you have to be in the person's head to kind of know, like, oh, well, what would the person do in that situation? And also time has something to do with it too. Like, I usually find these things, second, third draft, fourth draft, where, you've planned something to go one way, but you have to give it enough time to age for you to realize that it might not be the optimal direction for the book to go.
if a person, and if a being plopped itself down on this earth and you had to tell that person what you do and why it's vital for that person to understand this and accept it and see it as important as you do, what would you say to that being?
Wow. I would say, let's assume it's an alien, a UFO. I would say that, I tell stories, and if you want to really understand what the human species and the conditions that a human goes through the course of his, her, their life, listening to a story being told by a human is probably the best way to do it. Listening to many stories being told, I would say, go read a book, go see a movie, see lots of movies. You could just see the infinite ways that the human condition is, expounded upon the page and the screen and, the television screen, the phone screen. I just think there's so many, it's such a great time for storytelling in general. And I think, if an alien wants to understand and really deconstruct, our weaknesses, our strengths, I would say definitely check out a story somehow. Buy a book. Read. Yeah, I think my first novel is a Black dysfunctional family comedy. And I kind of modeled it after Danish films of the late 90s. There's this film called Festen, Celebration. It's a super dark but funny movie by Thomas Vinterberg. Have you seen it? I don't know if you've seen it. But anyway, it was part of the Dogma 95 movement. They shot it with, the little or no lighting. It's like natural lighting and shaky camera work. Anyway, it's about this son that goes back to his family reunion. I think it's his dad's 60th birthday party in the hinterlands of Denmark, and they're a rich family. And basically during the speech of, that they were supposed to be celebrating his birthday at, he basically outs his dad for being a molester. And hijinks ensues from there. As you can imagine, it's a big family. They're all kind of, self-absorbed and narcissistic, very privileged. And, crazy things happen. It's an amazing movie. I would definitely go check it out. I think it's from 95, 96, 97, somewhere in there. It's called Festen, or the English translation is Celebration. And that's a movie, the plot of that movie definitely influenced my novel, which is basically about a son who comes back to his hometown to run for mayor against his dad.
In the last week, tell me all about your body experience.
My body experience?
In writing. Like, wow, where was your body during this last week specifically?
It's interesting. I actually, writing has actually become part of my exercise routine. Strangely enough, I often bike, to a coffee shop. Usually it's I have coffee shops that are closer that I could walk to, but I choose to get on my bike and go to one further away, and then I write for an hour, and then I bike back. So it's actually part of my workout routine. So in a lot of ways, it is sort of it's part of my wellness, I guess, to be able to have, that hour-ish, hour and a half, if I'm really on a roll, in between half hour of biking, both ways, to sort of, get back to feeling good about myself from a body standpoint, feeling healthy, feeling like I'm able to do those things. For me, I'm a cancer survivor, so I put a lot of stock when I can feel good on a daily basis. It's important to me. So writing is part of that, as is biking, and I kind of put them together in a lot of ways.
When you're riding your bike, aside from getting this physical thing going on, are you ruminating about the novel as well?
Yes. I'm usually trying to figure out what am I going to do that day with these characters, with the with the plot, with that part of the book. What am I missing? And I think like just taking it outside and, it's kind of like the writerly walk, right? You take a walk, you can sort of see things a little bit clearer than you would sitting at your desk at home. So that's kind of the way I do it. Is I take a little ride on my bike and try to figure it out, and then when I get to the coffee shop, I can work on the things that I wanted to work on, and then when I get back on the bike again, I think about like what I just did, and then kind of go from there.